The game of Fantasy High, the thing that's supposed to be fun about it is, what if John Hughes ran a game of D&D? What if we had our fellowship forged not in Rivendell, but in like Evanston, Illinois?
What happens when you throw a bunch of teenagers into a world of fantasy, where each day is an adventure, and every class might be the end of the world? Welcome to Fantasy High, where the stakes are as high as the drama, and the only thing more powerful than magic is the friendships that drive it. But beyond the chaos and comedy, there are some big lessons we can learn from this campaign. Hi, Wiz here, and welcome to Lessons from Fantasy High. In this series, we're going to take an episode of Fantasy High, recap it, and see what lessons we might take from it. Sometimes these will be lessons for DMs, sometimes they'll be lessons for players. So let's begin at the beginning, with the beginning begins.
Our story takes place in the world of Spire. Spire mostly conforms to your expectations for a world of swords and sorcery, with one notable exception, and that's Elmville. Elmville is a little town in a nation called Solace. Solace may be home to elves, orcs, dwarves, and gnomes, but it resembles more of a 1950s through 1980s America. Our story begins with 6 freshmen on their first day of school, and the first bell.
And we'll start, as any campaign does, with character introductions. Our first is Fabian Seacaster, played by Lou Wilson. Fabian's father is Bill Seacaster, a famous pirate that made his fame and fortune on the high seas. Brennan uses this moment to both introduce the audience and to lean into Fabian's desire to make his father proud through athletic pursuits. Fabian aims to do this by becoming a star of the Blood Rush team, and his father explains that he's arranged a tryout for the Blood Rush team, for Fabian, and, as you do, made a bribe.
What do we say is the relationship between luck and talent?
500 gold pieces.
And hey, we're already into a good lesson. Brendan drops a bit of fun exposition and back and forth with Lou to make it clear what kind of character Fabian is. This isn't just for the audience, this is for the players too. During character introductions, assume the other players don't know who the other characters are, and try to establish both for you and them. And oftentimes, DMs and even players themselves might start a campaign without a full understanding of their character. This is a good time to ham it up and get those RP juices flowing for both you and the player. Establish the tone of the character, which tone is something Brennan excels at, and we'll talk about it in a moment. Let's move on to our second character, Kristen Applebee's, played by Allie Beardsley. We pan to Kristen, who is praying to her god Helio, a corn god, which Brennan immediately shifts tone into the trope that Kristen is going for, to get the vibes right, so to speak. And that vibe is a good Christian Bible camp kid. If you're from the Midwest, you'll know the type. Kristen is interrupted by her parents as they discuss her place as the chosen of Helio. There's some obvious tension between Kristen's open-minded nature and Kristen's parents, who clearly hold discriminatory views against non-humans. Kristen even admits that she wishes to go to Agford Adventuring Academy, a public school, so that she can meet normal people. We next move on to Gorgug Thistlespring, played by Zach Oyama. Brendan sort of lowers and softens his tone and slows his speech a bit, again to get the vibes right. Gorgug is a half-orc barbarian raised by gnomes. He's a bit of an outcast and a recluse, the stereotypical outcast and shy kid. He likes to keep to himself and is in search of community, and anxious to make new friends. Gorgug's adoptive gnome parents are Wilma and Digby, and it's made obvious they are the most wholesome and incredible parents to have ever parented. They offer very wholesome friend-making advice and sing Gorgug a song. Our fourth character is Adine Abernant, played by Siobhan Thompson. Adine is a high elf wizard from a family that is quite well off, and made clear to be quite snooty and a bit out of touch. Her father is an elvish ambassador, and Brennan uses this character to subtly introduce a plot hook. Adine's father is reading the newspaper and mentions headlines about the death of the elven oracle.
She can't have been that good an oracle if she didn't see the storm coming.
Adine!
Which will come up later. Adine has a bit of a back and forth with both her father and her sister, Elwain. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Forgive me if I'm not. These interactions really paint the angst and tension that Adine has with her family. It's also made clear that Adine and Elwain have quite a rocky relationship and a bit of a sibling rivalry. Elwain makes fun of Adine having to go to Agfort because she ended up failing an entrance exam to some prestigious school. Adine failed this because she has trouble with anxiety, suffers from panic attacks, which is a part of her character, and that gets established pretty quickly. And our penultimate character, Riz Gutgak, played by Brian Murphy, is a goblin rogue who fancies himself an investigator. We first meet him as he ponders his current investigation into the disappearance of his babysitter, Penny Luckstone. Riz is the son of a detective, Sklanda. Sklanda is a single mom who is quite busy with her own detective work, and she's doing her best. And it's shown that Riz is pretty hyper-fixated on solving mysteries, clearly inspired by his mother, especially the disappearance of Penny and the other missing children. who happen to all go to Agfort. Our sixth and final player character is Fig Faith, played by Emily Axford. Fig is going through a turbulent time in the forming of her identity. Her father, Galir, as it turns out, is not her biological father, and her mother, Sandra, had an affair with the devil that resulted in Fig being conceived. This all came to light when Fig's adolescent horns started coming in, and it was clear she was not an elf like her mother and father. Galir and Sandra separated, with Galir finding himself an apartment across town. Galir also put some misplaced anger at Fig, and Fig returned the favor by disowning him as her father, even though Galir did help raise her. Fig wants to know who her biological father is, who she calls her real father, and Galir is just some guy. So yeah, that's a lot to happen right before your freshman year of high school. So Fig has turned into a bit of a punk, a bit of a troublemaker. She's more interested in making music and causing trouble than school. Fig causes a bit of shenanigans, but Sandra and Galir eventually do get her to school for her first day at Agfort Academy. And here we are at Agfort Academy with each character. But you might notice the party is not yet together, because Brennan has a plan for that part. Let's see if you're able to catch it. It's very 1980s high school dramedy that the campaign is going for. Fabian, looking to fulfill advice from his father, looks around and goes to just slug the biggest, strongest guy he can find, which of course is Gorgug. And this causes Gorgug to enter a rage and a short brawl breaks out. It's an excellent example of seizing the opportunity to get the party together and interact that makes the characters stand out. And this is where we meet Vice Principal Goldenhorde, who breaks up the fight and gives attention to Fabian and Gorgug. Ding.
I had to let this one know that I wasn't going to take any of his shit.
Shit, looks like he's holding a flower.
While this is going on, Fig enters the teacher's lounge and gets caught trying to eat ghost food. She's caught by Goldenhorde and given detention. The first bell rings and the morning announcements commence. Brennan uses this to further introduce Goldenhorde and reinforce his characterization as the disciplinarian, as well as sprinkling more mentions of the principal, Arthur Agfort, who's a bit of an eclectic wizard and is in charge of the school and its namesake. I hadn't yet mentioned this, but Brennan has been sprinkling in very casual mentions of Agfort in dialogue, and this will pay off later. Our next scene is Riz meeting two popular seniors, Penelope Everpetal and Dane Blade. These are the typical prom king and queen, which coincidentally they are trying to reinstate prom king and queen, as it has apparently been abolished. The prom king and queen are dead. Long live the prom king and queen. Unfortunately, Dane's friend and Rushball teammate, Rag Barkrock, comes over and bullies Riz, throwing him into a trash can and calling him a ball. I guess he is a trash ball in that case. Adine then has her own run-in with Penelope, and Kristen locates the head coach of the Rushball team, Coach Daybreak. Coach Daybreak is a fellow member of her church, the Cathedral of Soul, so they are already familiar. A goth drow, Zane Darkshadow, harasses Kristen for her religion. He's obviously against organized religion in an edgy sort of way. Brennan is wasting no time introducing the NPCs that are inhabiting stereotypical roles in the 80s teen movie trope, which has just been excellently reinforced by both Brennan and the players. They seem to be having a lot of fun. But yeah, they're meeting a lot of the other students in the school. A lot of characters are getting thrown at the party in different interactions in between scenes and classes. And each of these characters will be playing at least some role in the coming story. Brennan is, of course, a very good DM, but it feels like he's very much at home in the 80s teen movie setting, and it seems to lend itself wildly successfully to roleplay and quick and snappy interactions with other characters, which Brennan excels at, probably because of his improv background. Next scene is at an opening assembly, where Principal Agfort himself is finally before the characters, and he goes on a wild and slightly nonsensical speech about adventuring and heroism. It's made immediately obvious that this character is meant to be both full of experience and wisdom, and also enigmatic and kind of goofy.
What is a hero? A hero is someone with the strength of heart, courage of spirit, and the might of will to go to strange lands and enact violence on things there.
And in the next scene, as everyone is meant to go to their classes for their classes, whatever character class you are determines what classes you go to, so you can learn to be better at that character class. I love this touch. It's pretty meta. And Adine's sister also mentions spell slots during their interaction. So you can see how meta things can be in the world. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think with such a focus on verisimilitude that they have, which is indeed my cup of tea, you can see that you can openly accept a meta and conceits of the game and the game world and still have excellent RP with bot-in players. But yeah, off to their classes. But of course, Fig, being a rebel she now is, skips class and decides to go to talk to Lunch Lady Doreen. And what I find interesting about this interaction is that Fig's player, Emily Axford, is kind of known to be a chaos agent. So the coming interactions had to be completely improvised by Brennan, but at the same time during this interaction, he's sprinkling story seeds and characterizations that will come up later. So what do I mean? Fig talks Doreen up, and Doreen tries to put her to work, hands her a crowbar to open up these drums, yes, drums of creamed corn. Fig instead goes in and plays the drums and gets a result on a performance check that's quite good. Fig endears herself to Doreen, and they have a bit of a bonding, and Doreen encourages Fig to at least try the classes that she plans on skipping. Brennan at least attempts to point out that the drums, but he's a bit interrupted, and he doesn't come back to it because of RP and drum playing that Fig did. Those drums will come up later. But he does point to these drums of creamed corn that might seem just a little wacky, a little quirk, but by the end of episode 2, it's clear he is trying to shine a light on them. And we'll get more into that next episode. So as Brennan moves them into the next scene, he calls out that Adine is walking by the library, and that she remembers some advice that her sister gave her, which is to steal a book from the restricted section. Luckily, the player, Siobhan herself, remembers that advice, and Brennan didn't have to remind her that much, kind of just primed her. That's not always going to be the case at your table, and you should not hesitate to remind players of their character's own goals. Adine does successfully nab the book, but suffers a panic attack as Fig and Kristen run into her in the hallway, bringing in 2 more characters into the scene. Golden Horde also comes along as Adine fails a check to keep the book hidden, and Golden Horde catches her and gives Adine detention as Kristen and Fig try to cover up for her. But Adine does fess up. As that scene wraps up, Lou Wilson, player of Fabian Seacaster, speaks up and requests that it be time for the Blood Rush trials, which, hey, players, if you ever want to quickly suggest a scene to your DM, you can, especially since this scene was already set up during Fabian's character introduction. It was going to happen eventually, and clearly Lou was excited for it, so he suggested it. So, on to Blood Rush trial. Fabian is clearly out of his element as he attempts to create camaraderie with the other Blood Rush players, Dane Blade and Rag Barkrock. I stumble over that every time. It's the Prom King and Rizbully, respectively. It doesn't help that Fabian is rather presumptuous, and he's already wearing a Blood Rush Letterman's jacket that his father gave him. The players and Coach Daybreak also make it clear that they think very little of the Seacasters, with Daybreak giving quite the pointed announcement that Fabian is trying out at the behest of his father, who is a pirate and a criminal, and only here because of an amnesty agreement. Essentially, those that swear to the Charter of Solace, they get amnesty. There's a hint of xenophobia, whether intentional or otherwise. Coach Daybreak clearly feels that the alleged crimes of Bill Seacaster should not be forgiven, and he and his family should not be here. In any case, Fabian goes through a tryout. He rolls and absolutely kills the first part of the tryout, but not so much the second part. Fabian is meant to pass the ball as a quarterback. Blood Rush is clearly an analog to American football, and instead of throwing the ball to another teammate, Fabian scrambles and runs into the end zone. The other teammates are not amused with his selfish heroics and does not make the team, despite absolutely destroying the team earlier. I think it's clear that the setup here is Fabian learning to become a better teammate, and Daybreak was looking for any excuse to exclude him from the team. Oh, and he gives Fabian detention for arguing when Fabian pushes back on his exclusion. So that's 2 detentions for Fabian.
You're not on the team.
I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. What?
You're not on the team.
I ran faster and I ended up playing. My father paid you. My father paid you money.
What the hell did you just say?
The next scene sees Riz searching for his rogue teacher as part of his first day of school pop quiz. I guess they have to find the teacher. He's distracted when he sees another student, Sam Nightingale, in the parking lot, speaking to an older tiefling, Johnny Spills. Johnny Spills. Do I need to say that right? Johnny Spills is greaser-coated, and this is where we get a little 1950s in the story. Riz approaches Sam and Johnny and interrupts their conversation. Johnny Spells is clearly a scumbag that is a full-fledged adult dating a high schooler. Icky. After Johnny leaves, Penelope Everpetal asks to speak to Sam privately, and Riz attempts to follow and eavesdrop, but they enter the girls' locker room. Riz finds another student, Ostentation Wallace, and asks her to enter the locker room for him and eavesdrop. Ostentation wants something in return. Ostentation probably couldn't think of anything good, so she thinks of something wild, which is for Riz to steal one of Golden Horde's tea bags, which he keeps in his office. Riz does manage to do so, but is given detention for his efforts. After returning to Ostentation and delivering the tea bag, she holds up her end of the bargain and heads off to spy for Riz. At this point, Golden Horde is still pursuing Riz, and once he reaches him, gives him detention. Though I'm not sure if that's double detention or same detention, and he just caught up to him. Anyway, and in the next scene, Principal Agfort begins the Day of Fellowship, a time for the students to band together and create their parties to forge their fellowships. Except the kids with detention, as Golden Horde interjects. Kids with detention, now go serve detention. And in this next part, you might have noticed, Kristen Applebee's is without detention. So she's the only one that's not going to be there. So she begs Coach Daybreak for detention so that she can join the bad kids and fulfill her desire to meet people who are unlike her, people who are not religious, and expand her so-called horizons. Daybreak eventually acquiesces and gives Kristen detention, which, let's take a moment to appreciate Kristen's player here, Allie Beardsley, for reading the dang tea leaves and being the engine, the catalyst behind Kristen finding herself into the bad kids party. If you're a player, your DM's going to love you if you are active in helping along the narrative.
All right, everybody listen up. Kristen Applebee's bore false witness.
That's like a cardinal sin.
Yeah, well, you lied because you weren't drinking vodka, and you should always drink.
The bad kids, all of our characters and party members, are now together in detention and off to lunch. While waiting in the lunch line, our favorite meathead bully, Rag, yoinks Kristen's Bible and tosses it into the drums of creamed corn. Adine retrieves the book of Kristen with Mei-chan. After lunch, the party sees all the other students having a great time creating their parties and forging fellowships. While the school day ends, they each have to go serve detention. A gnomish school counselor, Mr. Gibbons, attends to them and encourages them to talk about how they found themselves in detention. But suddenly, they hear a blood-curdling scream from down the hallway and from the cafeteria. The party sprints to the scene and finds a cadre of corn gremlins, a corn ooze, and what appears to be Lunch Lady Doreen, possessed by evil magic. And that's how the first episode ends. So that's episode 1 of Fantasy High. Episode 2 will begin with combat, and we'll discuss a little bit more about the constraints of Fantasy High and how the combat kind of starts, and Brendan's constraints on getting the players to specific places while also honoring their choices and roleplay. So we'll discuss that next week. Well, I don't know if that'll be next week. We'll discuss that next episode. And I don't know how often I'll bring these out, but hope maybe every other week. I don't know. I'm still figuring this YouTube out. Anyway, thanks for watching. You saw Wiz get mazed and sent to another plane. Well, this is this plane and I am Wiz. I guess this is just my form here. There are these two magical creatures that don't speak common, and they adopted me and fed me and sheltered me. And now they just really want head scratches and belly rubs, and I don't know. It keeps me here. They keep me from being out in the street in this world that I do not know. But yeah, this is Wiz. This is Wiz's human form. Okay.